There is a certain kind of intelligence that doesn't announce itself. It doesn't argue loudly. It doesn't reveal its strategy. It doesn't ask for your trust. It simply moves through the world in a way that bends outcomes, quietly, invisibly, surgically. And by the time you feel the pressure of it, the decision has already been made, not by you. Most people believe they are the authors of their own choices. They believe they think freely, react honestly, and form opinions without interference. But this belief is precisely what makes them vulnerable. Because highly intelligent people, the kind who have studied power, studied human psychology, studied the gap between what people believe and how they actually behave, they know that the human mind is not a fortress. It is a system. And every system has entry points. This is not about manipulation in the crude sense, not the aggressive, obvious pressure of a person who needs control desperately. That kind of manipulation is easy to see, easy to resist. The tactics you are about to learn belong to a different category entirely. These are the silent architectures of influence, the invisible hands that shape perception, guide emotion, and position you exactly where the other person needs you to be, without you ever realizing the geometry of the trap. What you are about to encounter is not comfortable knowledge. Understanding these tactics means confronting the reality that you have been subject to them, likely many times, by people you may have trusted, admired, or loved. But that discomfort is the beginning of clarity. And clarity, once earned, cannot be taken from you. Pay close attention. Not all teachers announce themselves. Tactic 1. There is a moment in almost every meaningful conversation where the frame of the discussion shifts. Most people never notice when it happens. One moment they are arguing their position with confidence. The next, they are defending themselves from a question they didn't expect, on territory they didn't choose. They didn't walk into that territory. They were guided there. This is the control of narrative architecture, the quiet, deliberate act of constructing the frame before the conversation even begins. Highly intelligent manipulators understand something that ordinary communicators never grasp: that whoever defines the terms of a conversation controls the outcome of that conversation. It is not about having the strongest argument. It is about deciding which arguments are considered legitimate in the first place. Machiavelli understood this. He did not write about persuasion as an honest exchange. He wrote about the staging of reality, the creation of a theater in which your opponent performs the role you have written for them. When someone frames a question as, "Why did you react so poorly?" rather than, "What did I do that upset you?" they have already assigned blame before a word of your defense has been spoken. The frame is the manipulation. The argument inside the frame is theater. And here's the dangerous part. The most dangerous version of this tactic operates across time. Intelligent manipulators build frames slowly, through repeated language, through what they choose to praise and what they choose to question. Over months, sometimes years, they reshape the internal map you use to evaluate yourself. And because the process is gradual, the map begins to feel like your own. To resist this, you must first become aware of it. Ask yourself, in any high-stakes conversation, who chose the terms? Who decided what was worth discussing? Who established what counts as evidence and what is dismissed? The moment you can see the frame, you are no longer fully inside it. And that distance, that single step of psychological separation, is the beginning of power. Tactic 2. There is a specific emotional state that makes people predictable. Not fear, not joy, something more subtle and more exploitable. It is the state of needing to be understood. The quiet, constant hunger that most people carry, to be seen as intelligent, to be validated as significant, to have their perspective acknowledged as worthy. Highly intelligent manipulators feed this hunger with surgical precision, not to satisfy it, but to create dependency. This is strategic validation, and it is among the most elegant instruments of psychological control ever devised. Carl Jung's most disturbing discovery was that people do not primarily want truth. They want confirmation. They want their existing image of themselves reflected back with warmth. The person who offers that reflection becomes, in the psychology of the target, a source of something precious. And we do not easily challenge the people who make us feel seen. We protect them. We defend them. We make excuses for behavior that, in any other person, we would condemn. An intelligent operator will spend the early phase of any influence campaign simply listening, asking questions that feel genuinely curious, reflecting back your words in ways that make you feel understood at a depth you rarely experience. This costs them nothing, but it purchases something enormous: your trust, your openness, your lowered defenses. And in that feeling of being truly perceived, you become, without knowing it, psychologically indebted. The debt is never called in clumsily. That would break the spell. Instead, when they need something from you, when they need you to override your better judgment, when they need your loyalty at a cost to yourself, they simply remind you softly, sometimes without words, of who you are in their eyes. And because you have been trained to treasure that reflection, you pay. The moment you understand this, everything changes. The most seductive compliment is not always generosity. Sometimes it is architecture. The antidote is not to become cold or suspicious of all warmth. It is to develop a more sophisticated relationship with validation. To ask, not just, does this person make me feel good? But, what does this person want? And can I see it clearly even while feeling valued by them? Emotional intelligence, at its highest level, is not warmth. It is precision under warmth. Tactic 3. Information is not power. Selective information is power. This distinction separates the amateur from the architect of influence. Highly intelligent manipulators understand that what you choose to reveal, what you choose to withhold, and when you choose to release information can sculpt another person's perception of reality as decisively as a sculptor shapes stone. And it operates in almost every domain of power you will ever encounter. Sun Tzu wrote that all warfare is based on deception, but the deepest reading of that principle is not about lying. Lying is crude. Lying can be detected and used against you. The superior method is deception through sequencing. You tell the truth, but never the whole truth, and never in the order that would allow someone to draw accurate conclusions before you need them to draw inaccurate ones. Consider the executive who shares growth metrics but delays disclosure of debt, the negotiator who reveals their timeline but conceals their alternatives, the person in an intimate relationship who shares vulnerability just enough to create closeness, while withholding the specific information that would shift the power dynamic. Each one leaves the other party making decisions based on a carefully curated version of the truth. This tactic is particularly difficult to resist because it exploits our cognitive architecture. The human mind does not wait for complete information before forming conclusions. It forms conclusions immediately, with whatever fragments are available, then filters all subsequent evidence through that early lens. The intelligent operator knows this. They do not merely choose what to tell you. They choose what to tell you first, because the first story you hear becomes the framework through which everything else is evaluated. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. Every time you are in a high-stakes exchange, ask yourself what is not being said, not in paranoia, but in discipline. The question, "What am I not being shown?" transforms you from a recipient of information into an analyst of it. And that transformation changes the nature of every conversation you will ever have. Tactic 4. There is a specific moment in human behavior that manipulative people understand far better than most. It is the moment when someone becomes emotionally activated. Anger, grief, desire, fear, excitement. In any of these states, the executive function of the brain, the part that strategizes, delays gratification, and evaluates consequences, is significantly compromised. Highly intelligent manipulators don't just wait for these emotional states to arise. They engineer them. This is emotional state induction, and it is perhaps the most direct route to bypassing another person's rational agency. Schopenhauer understood the tyranny of the will, the way emotion operates beneath rational thought, driving behavior in directions that the conscious mind later scrambles to justify. His insight was pessimistic but piercing. Most of what you believe is reasoning is, in fact, rationalization. The decision was made by something older and less deliberate than your thinking mind. Intelligent operators exploit this gap with precision. The urgency manufactured by an artificial deadline, the jealousy carefully provoked through a calculated mention of someone else's interest, the shame activated by a seemingly innocent question, the hope engineered through a vision of what could be yours. Each of these is a key, turning in the lock of a specific emotional response, opening the door to a decision that serves the manipulator's purpose. The most refined version of this tactic involves the emotional gradient, moving the target from a negative to a positive state through interaction with the manipulator. First, they introduce anxiety, uncertainty, a subtle threat to your status. Then, when you are sufficiently destabilized, they introduce relief, warmth, reassurance. The contrast makes the relief feel far more powerful than it would in isolation. The bond that forms in that moment is not love. It is leverage, architected to feel like love. This is where people lose power, not in moments of obvious confrontation, but in moments of emotional whiplash, so precisely calibrated that gratitude becomes the bars of the cage. To protect yourself, develop the discipline of delayed emotional response, not suppression, but the capacity to observe your emotional state from a measured distance, to ask what conditions created this feeling and whose hands were on the controls. The emotional state remains, but its power over your decisions diminishes the moment you can name its architecture. Tactic 5. The final tactic is the most sophisticated, and in many ways, the most disturbing, because unlike the others, it doesn't act on your perception of the world. It acts on your perception of yourself. This is identity leverage, and it operates through a simple but devastating mechanism. The intelligent manipulator identifies the story you tell yourself about who you are, your values, your self-image, your deepest sense of identity, and then positions the behavior they want from you as a natural expression of that identity. They don't ask you to betray yourself. They convince you that compliance is loyalty to yourself. Nietzsche wrote about the way people construct an image of themselves and then become imprisoned by that image, defending it with the ferocity of someone defending their life, because at a psychological level, they are. And intelligent manipulators understand that if they can tie a desired behavior to your self-concept, resistance to that behavior feels like self-betrayal. not self-protection. The person who says to you, "I knew you'd understand. You're not like other people. You're someone who can see the bigger picture," is not complimenting you. They are activating an identity that compels a specific response. You now cannot refuse without feeling that you have collapsed into being exactly like the ordinary people they distinguished you from. The compliment is a trap. The praise is a pre-commitment device, binding you to an action through the force of your own desire to remain consistent with who you believe yourself to be. The same mechanism operates through negative identity leverage. "I just didn't expect this from you" is one of the most powerful phrases in the arsenal of psychological manipulation. It does not threaten. It does not argue. It simply positions your behavior as a deviation from the person you have always claimed to be. And the internal pressure to restore consistency drives the target directly back into compliance. Not because they were coerced, because they coerced themselves in the service of their own self-image. Most people never realize this. They believe their values protect them from manipulation. But the opposite is often true. The more rigidly someone holds their identity, the more predictable their behavior becomes, and the more completely their principles can be weaponized. The world rewards strategy, not innocence. The antidote is not the absence of identity. It is a more fluid and examined relationship with the self. The willingness to ask, in moments of strong internal pressure, "Am I acting from genuine conviction, or am I protecting a self-image that someone else has learned to play, like an instrument?" You have now encountered 5 instruments of influence wielded by the most psychologically sophisticated people in every domain of power: narrative architecture, strategic validation, information asymmetry, emotional state induction, identity leverage. These are not theories. They are operating in conversations, negotiations, and relationships that surround you every day. The purpose of this knowledge is not to make you paranoid. Paranoia is its own kind of trap. It shuts down the very clarity it claims to protect. The purpose is precision. The ability to see, with cold and patient vision, the invisible geometry of the interactions you find yourself in. To observe without reacting. To choose responses that serve your actual interests rather than the interests of whoever has engineered the moment. Marcus Aurelius wrote, not as a man of ease, but as a man who governed an empire, that the first and highest form of power is power over one's own perception. Because the person who controls how you see is the person who controls what you do. And if that person is not you, then you are not yet free in any meaningful sense of the word. The question is not whether these tactics will be used on you. They already have been. The question is what you do with the knowledge that they exist, whether you use it to become more dangerous or simply more clear. That is a choice only you can make. But you can no longer make it in ignorance. That distinction between the person who knows and the person who does not is everything. It has always been everything. And now it belongs to you.